What up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be telling you guys my personal story. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to tell you guys essentially like what motivated me to become a doctor, when exactly I became motivated to make that career choice, and a little bit of how I got there. But I'm going to make this a series, so like what I did in middle school. Not that I did anything in middle school to contribute to my application, but just like I know a lot of kids are hearing now that you have to start so early to like do your volunteer work and whatnot. And like, let me be honest with you, I started doing my volunteer work, my research, all that stuff, my third year of college. I did 5 years total, right? So wait, no, fourth year of college, right? I started my fourth year of college. I started doing my research and my volunteer work and actually finding out information about how to apply to medical school. I don't recommend that, but it's just one of those things where like, if that happens to you, or if you're like third year right now and you feel like it's too late, you don't need to feel discouraged, because I essentially was like a late bloomer, if you will, in terms of understanding when the hell to do stuff. So yeah. Anyway, so as many of you guys may know, I'm Cuban. I was born in Cuba in '92. So I'm currently 24 years old, and immigrated along with my parents to the United States in August of '95, I believe. Originally, both of my parents were pediatricians in Cuba. For those of you guys that don't know, in Cuba, a doctor doesn't make the type of money that they have the possibility of making in the States. As a doctor, you probably make the same amount as like a farmer, or someone who works the cash register at a grocery store. Like, the social status is not there, and neither is the financial status, because the Cuban Revolution essentially, you know, just ruined everything. It's communism after all. Anyway, so moving to the United States, my parents both had to start delivering flowers. I mean, that was their job, but on holidays in particular. But they ended up having to buy an $800 truck. No windows, so on Christmas, for example, or in December, January, February, when it gets that pretty dry, cold air and cold temperature in Vegas, freezing their butts off. The only thing they could put was a black bag on there on the passenger side, and then a white clear one on the driver's side, so you know they could see. But it was a struggle for them. It definitely was. They had to raise a kid not knowing English. Both my parents had to bust their butts to learn English. My dad was working at the Mirage. If you guys know, they work multiple jobs. So if I just tack on jobs here, just yeah, no specific timeline with the jobs, right? My dad was working at the Mirage, cleaning up the Seaford and Roy stadium, and my mom was working at a market. But so they had their flower job. They had they had a medical assistant job. My dad was working at the Mirage, and my mom was working at a supermarket. Aside from that, they were also taking classes at CSN to learn English so they could get their citizenship, right? So working 3 jobs. My grandma was taking care of me. I remember there's like a special pass where if you're here, you can come visit from Cuba if you have family members here for a certain amount of time, a visitor's visa essentially. And so my grandma was the one taking care of me. I barely ever saw my parents, yet for some reason, thank God, you know, I was never resentful of that I rarely ever saw them. That was just how it was. You know, I kind of understood that I was born in one country and now lived in another, and then I had to learn English and the culture here and the way of life here, and so that's what I did, right? All that being said, my dad eventually decided to try and renew his medical license here. So you guys understand, when you're a doctor in Cuba, you're always an MD, right? Doesn't matter where you go, you got your doctorate, right? Your doctor of medicine. But you can't practice here unless you have a United States medical license, right? That's why you have to take the USMLE step tests. So my dad had to learn English for that. Not only that, he had to learn medical terminology, and he already knew it in Spanish, and then learn it in English. So my dad had to quit his jobs. My mom had to pick up the 3 to 4 jobs that she had, and my dad would just study. I forget how long he had to study for, but essentially he failed the USMLE. I hope he doesn't mind me telling you guys this, but he failed the USMLE test, I want to say 2 times, And then on the third time, he wasn't going to take it. And my mom was just like, you need to do it. You need to do it. Like, we can't live like this anymore. We came here to give our children a better way of life than we had in Cuba because it was crap. And so, yeah, my mom pushed him to do it. And lo and behold, he passed. He passed step 1, took step 2, passed step 2, took step 3, I think, right? And passed step 3. And then he had to redo his residency. So in Cuba, he had already done medical school, had already done residency. He had to do that all over again, right? And he almost got sent off to Puerto Rico. And what had almost happened was either my dad was going to move to Puerto Rico and I would have grown up for the next 4 or 5 years without my dad, or we would have had to relocate to Puerto Rico. But the downside to that is, like, dude, we just left the freaking Caribbean. Why the hell would we go back, right? And like Puerto Rico, although it is a U.S. territory, right, you live similar to Cuba, right? There's no, like, the economy's not the greatest. Like, yeah, you work on U.S. currency and whatnot, but it's still not the greatest place to be. Not hating on Puerto Rico. I'm just saying in terms of like the situation that we left, going back to it was not ideal. And so my parents ended up meeting some people, and my dad ended up being able to get a residency at UMC. So he did his three years of pediatric residency at UMC. And I was able to grow up with him being there and grow up with my mom being there. However, going through middle school and going through high school, like, my parents weren't really there to go to my sports games. Like, they went to a few, but they weren't there because they had to focus on building a career. It's like, it's one of those things where people always see the success and they're like, oh, look at this family, they're doing so well for themselves. But that was recently. Like, we didn't go on our first international trip, like, to Cancun until I was 16 years old. So that was, 8 years ago. Now it seems like a long time ago, but I've been here since I was 3. So it's one of those things where the majority of my life I was living here, just listening to my parents talk about how they were going to improve their lifestyle. But yeah, enough about them. I'll get back to them later. So fast forwarding to high school, like I said, my parents weren't able to be there for my sports games, and that kind of hurt me a little bit because you see a lot of the school that I went to, at least, was very intertwined in terms of the families and kids that played sports there. So either they've known each other since they were really young and have played on club teams since they were young, and now the whole families know each other. And so I kind of felt left out, but there was nothing I could do about it. I talked to my parents and they were like, listen, this is like, our situation is different. You have to understand that. Not as an excuse, but just something that I had to understand. And then came, like, I want to say sophomore, junior year, and I decided that I wanted to go to college because that was where my parents emphasized that education is what's going to get you, like, out of the slump that you can be in life. So I decided to do that. Had no idea how to apply. Had no idea what I wanted to be. But then I started doing decently in science classes, and I was like, why don't I just become a doctor? Like, I've never had that urge as a little kid, like, oh, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to do this. The only thing I wanted to be an NBA player when I was in elementary school, and I'm 5'10" on a good day, so, like, that wasn't gonna happen, right? I never wanted to be like a firefighter or anything else, a businessman at the time. And I was like, this is just what I'm meant to do. Like, both my parents are doctors, and they never, I apologize for that. They never pressured me into becoming a doctor. They always said, you be what you want to be. But I just had an affection towards the sciences, right? And so I decided to apply. I was too scared to go out of Nevada, so I applied only to UNLV and then to Reno, where I am now. But yeah, I didn't even have to, like, apply online or anything like that. We had this thing called on-campus admissions where counselors and whatnot would come to the school, look at your transcript, look at your SAT scores or ACT scores, and if you had, like, the very bare minimum, then you got accepted. I was having a lot of issues with my mom at the time, 16 to like 18 years old. I was super rebellious, so we didn't get along, so I just wanted to get the hell out of the house. I decided to go to Reno. She didn't think that was a good idea because my group of friends at the time, she didn't necessarily agree with. And yeah, it was just one of those, we had beef, right? We had beef. So I left for Reno, and I decided, I'm going to major in biology, right? I want to be a doctor. And I was there for about 3 weeks, and then I took the first math test you take in college, which is like trigonometry or something like that, and I got a 76.4% on it. And then I literally had this mental breakdown. Understand how I got that grade, because I studied a lot and it wasn't good enough. And that was my first test in college, and high school was kind of a joke. I don't want to say it was super easy, but I mean, compared to like what I've gone through since, high school is nothing compared to it. And I did decently well in high school, right? I wasn't valedictorian or anything like that, but anyways, getting back to the test. So I had talked to my parents, and my mom told me this whole story that I'm telling you guys now, because at the time I still really didn't understand it. But she made it clear that my dad had to essentially redo his whole medical career. If he can do it twice, there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to do it once. She also told me this story about how when she was in her residency, she had to write essentially what is like a senior thesis or a PhD thesis here in the States, and it was on Down syndrome. And this was before I was born. And lo and behold, when she had her prenatal screening done, it showed up that I was supposed to have Down syndrome, and the pregnancy was just super bad. I'm sorry if I'm jumping around here, but the pregnancy was super bad, and she made it clear. She was like, "Listen, you didn't end up being born with Down syndrome," and I think that she believed that was a sign from God. Like, I'm meant for greater things. And so she told me, she was like, "Listen, you made it. If you made it through that, since from before you were born, you've immigrated and left a communist country. You've managed to learn English. You've managed to even get into college when no one expected that of you. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do well on this test." So she told me to seek out the resources. I ended up finding the math tutor center here on campus at UNR, and I went to tutoring every single day. And I was there till like 11 o'clock at night when it closed, if that was the time, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I studied up until the final exam. We had like 2 or 3 exams, and I needed a 98% to get an A in the class, right? And this is after I'm hearing like, you need A's to get into medical school, you need this, you need that. And I'm like, all right, well, like, I guess I'm not, like, I had, all the other classes were pretty simple, and because that was my first test, I had already, stepped my game up in the other classes. But I was like, I'm gonna get my freaking first B or C in this freaking class, and I'm not gonna be able to get into medical school because I can't even pass the most basic math class in college. So I studied my butt off, and I ended up getting a 99.6 on the test. I have no idea how it happened, but it was from that point forward that I realized that, I can do this. I just have to put my mind to it, and I have to continue. Every time I feel down, I have to think about what motivates me, right? That being, my dad had to do it twice. I can do it once. I was supposed to have been born with a prenatal established disease, and I wasn't. I was able to immigrate to this country successfully and have a at least middle class upbringing here. So there's no reason why I should be any different than anybody else. While I was going through my time here at UNR, I decided that I wanted to transfer, right? Because I personally didn't like the city at the time. The education was great. I really liked the school and everything, but I just didn't feel connected to anyone here in particular. I had always wanted to go to USC. I was too lazy to apply though out of high school. I really enjoyed watching their football team and their football games because I was a big fan of Reggie Bush and Lindell White and Matt Leinart and like Pete Carroll and all that stuff. So I decided to apply, and I ended up getting in. I was in Ecuador. I was calling my dad every time I could when I was there, and I was like, "Dad, did you check the mail? Dad, did you check the mail?" And I didn't even get my acceptance letter until like July, so everyone was already enrolled by the time that I got my acceptance letter. But I was so happy because it was one of those things where so many people that I knew had applied and not gotten into USC, and I did. I transferred with a pretty high GPA. And people try to take that away from me. Like, they were, by the time I was graduating and when I got there, they were like, "Oh, well, you didn't really bust your butt to get in here because it's so much easier to get in as a transfer student." And I'm like, why can't you just support me? Like, why do you have to bring me down and try and take things away from me just because I did it a little bit differently than you? just because I didn't apply straight out of high school. Okay, maybe I wasn't good enough to get in out of high school, but you know what? I was good enough to get in after high school. I was good enough to get in after busting my butt for 2 years at UNR and then transferring. So, you know, like, what's my diploma going to say? The University of Southern California. That's exactly what it says. I'm super proud of them. I have 2. And it's like people try and take that away from me because I didn't do all 4 or 5 years at USC. And it's like, it doesn't matter, yo. I did 5 years of college. It doesn't matter where I finished. At the end of the day, it's just a piece of paper. But yeah, transferred to USC. I picked up, this is where I finally realized that I needed extracurriculars for medical school. Like my second to last year, right? So my senior year, not my super senior year. And I picked up a bunch of stuff and I was struggling. I was like, I don't know how the hell I'm going to do this. I studied for a whole year for the MCAT. Sat down for it 3 times. All 3 times, the first time I sat down, I was terrified. I just left, right? I was like, nope, I'm not doing this. Second and third time I took it and I didn't feel comfortable about it. So I just voided the test both times. And the 4th time, which was literally like a few months ago, like 1 year ago, sorry. When I took it, I submitted it. I didn't think it was going to be good enough. Look, I'm not ashamed to say I had to get tutoring for the MCAT. Not many people know that, but I had to get tutoring for the MCAT. It was very expensive and very much worth it because look where I am now, right? So if you have to do that, don't be ashamed, man. I don't care if like someone else barely studied for 3 months and got a 43 or 41 or whatever it is now, 720, whatever it is. Don't be ashamed of that. So yeah, I had to study for a whole year and a freaking half for it until I felt comfortable to take it. And I applied. Let me just tell you this story. I went to my pre-med advisor at USC trying to get information like, how do I do this? When can I apply? Can you go over my personal statement, etc., etc. And then based on my grades, my GPA, my MCAT score, and all this other stuff, I was like, yo, do you think I'll get in? He was like, yeah, you should probably apply to DO schools. Now, before I get on with this, I'm not hating on DO schools. You're going to be a doctor. More power to you. All right? There's certain people that prefer DO. Certain people prefer MD. I prefer MD. That's just me. Okay? Anyways, he was like, you should probably apply to DO. You should do this. You should probably apply to, in Mexico, to University of Guadalajara. All that stuff. And I was like, well, do you think I'll get in? And he was like, to be honest, man, you're probably going to end up back in Reno. Mind you, I am here, right? But the way and the circumstances under which he said that statement didn't go, like, it didn't fly well with me, right? He said it in a way as if I wasn't going to be good enough for other schools. The only reason I would even get here is because it's my in-state school, and it was almost like a sympathy type of thing. That wasn't the case. I got like 14 to 15 interviews, got into about 12 of those schools and waitlisted and on the other 2 to 3 schools. I chose this place because I got a full tuition scholarship. Again, this video is not meant to brag. It's not meant for you to feel sorry for me or for me to boast. That's just what happened. And all that comes because of the perseverance that I had, the support that I had from my family, the support that I had from my friends, and just not giving up and not comparing. I had friends who had literally perfect GPAs, literally perfect MCAT scores. They interviewed, didn't get into medical school. You know, it's like there is some luck. There's a luck attribute to it, but there's also work and persistence. Okay, like if you get rejected, the way that you feel better about that is to be persistent. If someone tells you no, you don't take your business elsewhere. You continue. You be persistent because that's what med school is like. And that applies to almost anything in life. You have to be persistent. So, all that being said, that's my story. I'm going to break it down into certain sections for other videos that I'm going to make. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's just letting you know that, like, if I can do it being an immigrant from another country, having to learn English and go through all this crap that a lot of people go through as well, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do it. You too can get, I know I sound so promotional right now, but you too can get a scholarship to medical school. You too can get in your first try. You too can get a good score on the MCAT. You don't have to worry about, oh, my MCAT's not good enough, my GPA is not good enough, I don't have enough research, I don't have this, I don't have that, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. Alright? You can do it. Whew! That was a lot. This video, guys, jumped around a lot. I really apologize, sincerely apologize from the bottom of my heart. This is like the second or third time I've ever been talking to a webcam. It's so weird. It's like, hi, webcam. And I got this big ass microphone here. But yeah, so blips. Thank you for watching. Thank you for taking the time to appreciate, if you do, this long video. It's just an introduction as to how I was able to get to where I am today, and the basis and foundation of every other video that I make is going to be from this video. So if you guys can please like, subscribe, please share to any friends that you might have going to nursing, medical school, PA, nurse practitioner, medical assistant, even like any of that stuff, dentist. Please share it with them. I'd be more than happy to talk to them about how I did it, how I applied, all the things that I did. So thank you guys very much for watching.